Your mind reacts to everything, and that's why you feel drained. You're still in the same situations. Nothing around you really changed, but your reactions did. Things that used to pull you in don't affect you the same way anymore. Thoughts that used to take over your attention don't stay as long. Situations that used to stay in your head for hours start to fade faster, and at first this feels small, almost like it doesn't matter, but it does. Because this is usually where mental stability actually begins. Not when life gets easier, not when you finally figure everything out. It starts when your mind stops reacting automatically to everything. At the beginning, this doesn't feel like a major change. You still think, you still feel things, but it doesn't take over the same way. But you stop getting pulled into everything before. Everything was automatic. You receive a message, and your mind immediately tries to interpret it. You have a conversation, and you replay it afterward. You make a small mistake, and your mind keeps going back to it. You think about the future, and your brain starts creating scenarios. There was no gap. Something happened, and your mind entered it right away. And once it entered, it stayed there. That's the pattern. Your mind doesn't just react, it continues. It builds on what happened. It extends situations. It creates extra layers of thinking. So one moment turns into multiple rounds of mental activity. That's why your mind feels busy even when nothing major is happening. That's why normal days still feel mentally exhausting. Most people think mental stability comes from control, from managing thoughts better, from staying calm all the time, from fixing internal reactions as quickly as possible. But that usually creates more pressure, because now your mind is responsible for everything. You're trying to control every thought, every emotion, every internal movement. That's exhausting. A better approach is simpler. Mental stability doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from not engaging with everything. Not every thought needs to be followed. Not every reaction needs to be extended. Not every situation needs to continue inside your mind. This doesn't mean you ignore life. It means you stop giving the same level of attention to everything. And that changes how your mind behaves. Think about how mental overload actually builds. It's because of how long things stay active in your mind after they happen. A short interaction can stay in your head for hours. A simple comment can turn into repeated thinking. A small problem can become multiple imagined outcomes. So one moment becomes extended mental activity. And this happens again and again. That's where the pressure comes from. Not from the event itself, but from the continuation. When you stop reacting to everything, this process starts to change. You still notice things, but they don't stay as long. You don't keep replaying them the same way. You don't keep adding layers to them. You don't keep building on top of what already ended. And that reduces the mental load, because now things actually end. They don't keep going inside your head. There's another part of this that most people don't notice. When your mind reacts to everything, it also carries everything forward. You don't just deal with what is happening now. You carry what already happened into the next moment. A conversation from earlier is still in your head hours later. A small mistake follows you into the rest of your day. A thought about the future starts affecting how you feel right now. So your mind is never really dealing with just one thing. It's dealing with multiple layers at the same time. What is happening now? What already happened? What might happen next? And that creates a constant sense of pressure, not because everything is urgent, but because nothing is allowed to end. When you stop reacting to everything, this starts to change in a very practical way. You begin to close loops faster. Things don't stay active in your mind for as long. Situations don't keep repeating internally. Thoughts don't automatically connect to other thoughts. And this creates something very important: mental space. Not as an idea, but as a real experience. You feel less mentally crowded, less pulled in different directions, less overwhelmed by things that used to feel bigger than they were. And this is one of the first signs that your mind is becoming more stable. So what does this look like in real life? It starts in simple situations. You get a message that feels off. You remember something from earlier. You think about something that might happen later. And your mind wants to react. It wants to interpret, to explain, to replay, to prepare. That's the moment to notice. Not to force anything, just to see the impulse. That impulse is important because most mental exhaustion doesn't come from the first thought. It comes from everything that comes after. The second layer, the third layer, the continuation. So instead of following that automatically, you pause. You let the thought exist without continuing it. You let the situation be without extending it. At first, this feels unfamiliar because your mind is used to staying involved. But over time, this becomes easier because your brain starts learning that not everything requires engagement. Mental stability is not something you suddenly reach. You build stability by not continuing everything your mind starts, by staying involved in fewer things, by letting situations end when they end, by not turning every moment into extended thinking. Over time, this changes how your mind feels. There's less pressure, less noise, less constant engagement. Not because life is different, but because your mind is doing less unnecessary work. That's what actually reduces the mental load. Your mind isn't tired because of what happens. It's tired because nothing stops. You don't need to control everything to feel better. You don't need to fix every thought. You don't need to react to every situation. You just need to stop engaging with everything. That's where stability begins. And if you stay consistent with that, your mind starts to change in a real, noticeable way. If this made sense to you, stay with this. In the next videos, we're going deeper into how this stability develops and how your mind becomes more consistent over time. Be prosperous from the inside out.